Hello and welcome to something slightly different on the channel today. Following our success with Championship and EFL predictions, we are moving over to the Irish Cup. And if anyone wants to doubt the credentials before we start the Irish Cup final predictions, just look at Charlie's Twitter feed for the semi-finals, because he told us what the final would be and he was right. And he is now coming to us live from the Drive-Thru Express to tell us all about the two teams and who is going to win the Irish Cup final. So absolutely no pressure at all, Charlie.
No, I do apologise for the location. I thought I'd be back home in time, but alas, I'm not, because we've got a ton of recording because there's so much happening this week. But anyway, that aside, yeah, no, I'll be honest. I want to address the prediction thing. It was more heart overhead in the sense of, obviously, you know, being a Ballymena fan as such, inverted commas, just as in terms of watching them more often than any other team and the in-law supporting them. And then, yeah, I think Glentoran were good going forward, but obviously we say that. It was 2-1 draws that led to it. But maybe to ask you quickly, as someone who's not watched as much Irish football maybe as what I would have, it's fairly entertaining. I mean, there's no point trying to dress it up. The standard, particularly outside of the top 2 or 3, isn't anywhere as good as maybe what you see in England, but it's certainly entertaining. Defences are not necessarily the strongest, which normally leads to entertaining games. I don't know what you thought, but
I mean, it's probably largely reminds me of the National League maybe 10 or 15 years ago, where it was mainly semi-pro and it was blood and thunder. It was end-to-end. I guess probably the two teams that played in the second semi weren't quite as direct as most in the league, but still you get that end-to-end game. You get plenty of chances at both ends, and you see a lot spurned as well, which we'll talk about when we come on to penalties. So I can only thank you for introducing me to it 2 years ago, because I'd never watched Irish football before.
I agree, like the National League thing as well, because if you look at even the lads we've spoken to on, you know, the podcast and stuff, sort of been to England, but if they've been at a bigger club, they haven't necessarily broke into the first team, or if they're like that Shannon Clucas, they've sort of been in and around the bottom end of League Two. And there's no reflection on them, but I'm just saying that, you know, that's sort of it's that sort of standard, isn't it? So it is exciting for it. But yeah, anyway, on to the final, which obviously happens on Friday night. And free football as well. We always advocate free football, don't we?
And that's the reason we like to sell this, because it is on BBC Northern Ireland. You can watch it on free on the iPlayer on TV, and it's great for people like us who don't have Sky Sports to be able to watch free football. However, to talk about who's going to win the final, we need to quickly review the two semis. So the first one you watched in full and I watched extended highlights. So talk to me about Coleraine v Ballymena, and the first of probably not a great game, but certainly a dramatic ending.
Yeah, to be honest, I think so the Ballymena manager is David Jeffrey, and he was, you know, a very successful manager at Linfield for years and years. But to be honest, quite often in the short time that I've been following them, sort of 6 or 7 years, they're a very good cup team, but I don't really understand why, because even I've watched a few cup games and they tend to get battered in most of them. And I don't know how there's some sort of resilience and maybe a wily manager or what, but it was the same yesterday when we were recording it in terms of the semi-final. Coleraine with a far better side, a lot more quality, looked a lot fitter, they, you know, just very direct. I mean, I've said this to you before when I've watched Coleraine a few times this season against Ballymena. They're the best second ball team I've ever seen. You know, they get the ball at the fullback, he hits it to Owen Bradley up front, and then they just, the rush off the second ball is fantastic. And if they don't do that, they're really good at winning set pieces, which is obviously where the goal come from. And probably slightly unlucky with a few offsides. But again, one of those was from a set piece. So they're masters of what they do, Coleraine, which I still don't quite understand how Ballymena come out with a draw against them. I think what I would say, Ballymena got 3 in the middle. The team selection was a bit off, I thought. But when they play through them 3 in the middle, and, you know, that extra man can make a difference depending on who you're playing against, they look a half-decent team. But for whatever reason, for 88 minutes, they decided to just go back to front, which just suits a lot of Irish League teams, because, you know, a lot of the centre-halves in Irish leagues are not necessarily the quickest, but they're big, strong lads who love to head a ball. And if you play to their sort of strengths, you're always going to struggle. So it was an interesting game. It wasn't one necessarily that was amazingly exciting for quality, but when you got like 10 minutes to go and teams throwing everything at it, it was exciting. Ballymena obviously went for penalties and were probably better in extra time, but you can tell these boys haven't played football for 3 or 4 months because the quality dwindled very quickly.
I mean, you mentioned the 88th minute, and I think it was 87 minutes and something where Aaron Burns and Kenny Kane were introduced. And that is inadvertently the most inspired tactical double substitution you have seen all season, probably.
Yeah. Well, do you know what it is? I think, to be honest, there's some older lads there at Ballymena who are good players, or were good players. So like Tony Kane, who actually went to Blackburn when he was younger, lads like that. But I think their legs are starting to show a bit, and they're a bit, I don't know, Coleraine had a much younger side, and I look at the Glentoran team, it's a very young team in general, so with lots of pace. So the lads are like Tony Kane and people like that. I don't imagine them playing, and he proved that with the substitutes he all brought on were all under 25, I believe. So they had lads like Leroy Miller, who's a brilliant midfielder in there, and a bit of quality on him. So I think probably team selection didn't help Ballymena, and they were sort of chasing a tail after that. But it's hard, you know, a big game like that, maybe you do want experience. But I think he'd have learned a lot from that, David Jeffrey, for the final.
Absolutely. And I think the final thing we have to talk about, as you say, the first of two semi-finals that both went to penalties is, and I know they're not in the final and we shouldn't dwell on it too much, but the standard of the Coleraine penalties is among the worst I've ever seen. And I do apologise to anyone who may see this, but it wasn't great, was it?
No, no. There was one, I think it was the last one. Yeah, and it must have gone a good 3 foot over the bar. And I'm not even too sure how you do that from sort of 12 yards. But yeah, he's managed to do that. But it'd be interesting. You know, I think Ballymena play 3-5-2 quite often, and it's quite a defensive sort of setup. It depends. If they play through the middle, they've got half a chance. If they're going back to front, it'll be a mauling. It definitely will. But we'll get on to obviously that in a minute.
Absolutely. And if we quickly review the second semi-final as well, Cliftonville, Glentoran, I mean, we both know each other's opinions on this because we were sharing messages throughout the majority of it. But I think it's fair to say of the two games, it was the more fluent footballing match. The two sides, as we mentioned, who tend to play more football in the league on the floor. And I think the one thing that shone through for me was Glentoran's fitness, because even in extra time, there were Cliftonville players pulling up every 30 seconds a minute with cramp. And Glentoran, there were no signs of it at all, which is incredible after the time off for a side like that.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of quality, and there's a lot of lads who, although young, have played in the Football League and other places, you know. So you've got that Van Ogelbeek and things like that, and Naziri and people. So I think there's a lot of quality there. You know, I think they're very good at getting the ball out wide. To be honest, Cliftonville weren't a bad sort of. That would have made a great final. To be honest, those two. With, you know, and I mean, I say that as a inverted commas Ballymena fan, but I think it would have been a very good final. You know, Clifton were very good and very quick on the counter. And that's something that if I was probably a Ballymena sort of coach or something like that, would be looking at maybe a way of getting in there, because Glentoran do play quite high. They do. The fullbacks go marauding forward. Well, I mean, I say the lad down at right back was actually a wide midfielder, and he was, you know, bombing forward. So it was an exciting game for that reason. How it stayed 1-1, I don't know, because to be honest, you know, I think 3 times it hit woodwork. So it'll be an interesting final. I can only really see it at the minute going one way, but that's off of one game. You never know, do you? So
I think it's fair to say in that game, Cliftonville were probably playing or trying to play the better passing football. Glentoran on the breaks looked so much more clinical. They were always looking for that killer pass, as I was saying throughout. But then again, eventually we got to penalties. And I think it's fair to say, and it's the one comment I made on this from the Goalkeepers Union of old Sunday League days, is Glentoran's last 2 penalties. They were basically out of it. We were expecting Cliftonville to go through. And the 5th penalty for Cliftonville, I thought was a very good penalty. It was hit with power into the bottom corner, as close to the side netting as you could go. And a 39-year-old keeper, Mr. Morris, makes the most unbelievable save you will ever see. It is one of the best penalty saves I've seen in a long time. And a few minutes later, he was the hero. Yeah,
I think the thing is, you can have all the experience you want, and like you say, 39 is you know, obviously goalkeepers do tend to play on a bit longer, but to still get down like that, it's one thing having experience from, I don't know, say coming for crosses and stuff, but it's another thing to pull off an athletic save like that. So, you know, 39 years young, I think is probably the better way of saying for him. But yeah, no, that it's nice to see like that. That's what you sort of miss some of that in the Premier League in England. Those sorts of stories, you know, you don't always get that sort of things. It's quite nice to see a 39-year-old goalkeeper getting his team into an FA Cup final. But yeah.
Absolutely. And we move on to the final now. With the 2 teams decided, it is Glentoran v Ballymena. Now, as you probably alluded to, and most fans would admit, on paper, there is only really one winner of this. However, you could have said that for the semi-final that Ballymena featured in. Yeah. So it's not going to be that simple. Obviously, you're going to find it very hard to rule head over heart, which makes it a doubly difficult job for you. But with Glentoran being clear favourites, I guess the first question is, are they going to live up to that tag?
Yeah, I think so. I think, do you know what it is? I think the styles of, if I was a Ballymena fan, manager, whatever you want to call it, I would have preferred Cliftonville, because I think they play 3-5-2 as well. Yeah. I think Glentoran are so good out wide. They've got so much pacing and trickery that, you know, Naziri, Rory Donnelly, I mean, he, you know, he's in the league with Gillingham. There's some good quality there. And if I'm honest, the Ballymena, one thing they lack massively is pace. I mean, Jim Irwin, one of the centre halves, he's about 4'6", bless him, and he's 35. Do you know what I mean? And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're talking about playing 3-5-2 against a team that overloaded fullbacks, they're brilliant, like you say, with that killer pass. I can only really see it going in Glentoran's way. And that's just because of the styles. I think if they've been Cliftonville, who are a bit more patient, gives you a bit more time to set yourselves up as a defence and things like that for Ballymena. I think Glentoran moved the ball quickly. And just that laggy sort of thing of not playing for a few months and going to extra time and not really having that pace in the team in the first place, it would point to a Glentoran win. I think there is some good players there. However, there is that element of, if they are going to push forward, if they don't necessarily get an early one and get a bit frustrated, they are going to leave gaps at the back. Is whether you're good enough then to hit him on the counter. I don't know. It's in terms of styles, it'll make for a good game because I think you've got two contrasting styles. As a Ballymena perspective, I think Glentoran will have too much quality for them, and I think they'll probably win it. But yeah, that's my sort of Glentoran thing. I just think that they press very high. They play high up the pitch. The fullbacks are bombing forward all the time. When you've only got two wing backs, so basically two wide men, I think them pulls midfielders out of shape, and you're going to be in all sorts of bother, to be honest.
I'm largely in agreement with how the style of the game will go. I think the one thing you mentioned in Rory Donnelly in particular is firepower, which Ballymena probably didn't look like scoring as frequently as Glentoran, but then you could say Glentoran wasted a lot of those chances, although most of them were by the width of a woodwork. So you can't read too much into that. The one thing I would say is probably the opposite to you. I think if Ballymena can find a way to get an early goal, I think they'll probably, then the tactic suits them because you've got 9 behind the ball and you've probably got a chance of holding on. But I think it's probably going to go the other way. I'm going to predict that it's probably 0-0 at half time after a pretty cagey first half, or I won't use the commentator's words frantic again because it was doing my head in. But otherwise, the coverage was excellent, by the way. But it will be end to end. But I don't see there being too many clear chances the first half. But I think based on Glentoran Monday night, the superior fitness will tell second half. The superior pace, the superior, players that have played full-time football more frequently, I guess, is the thing in the past. So I think Glentoran will nick it late on. And I think the final score will be Glentoran 2, Ballymena 0. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. No, I think the only way I can see Ballymena getting something is if they a bit more patient, keep the ball a bit better. Because if you give them the ball away to Glentoran, they're just going to hit you on the, with that quick attacking football out wide. Obviously, I'd like to see Ballymena win, but I think my head is probably saying, I reckon it'll be 3-1. I think Ballymena are not the worst from set pieces. They might get a corner or a free kick, swing one in there. But I think Glentoran have got far too much quality. And I think the game might even be out of sight by like half time. But I think 3-1 Glentoran. I think if it depends which Ballymena show up, but I can't see it being the one that got them into second place last season. So I just think they're still a bit laggy, a bit tired, and didn't really play to their strengths against a Coleraine side. And I would argue Glentoran are better than them. So I don't know. I can only see a 3-1 Glentoran win personally.
So we've both gone for Glentoran. Of course, let us know down in the comments what you think and how you enjoyed the semi-finals if you managed to catch them. Hopefully you'll be watching on Friday night, 8 o'clock, BBC Northern Ireland 2, and obviously on BBC iPlayer as well. If you did enjoy this one, please do put a thumbs up on it. Let us know down in the comments what you think will happen, and subscribe to the channel for regular content, predictions, vlogs soon, hopefully, and podcasts too. There's loads of interviews with Northern Irish stars in the eye above, so you can catch up with them as well. But thank you very much for watching this one, and hopefully we'll see you next time.